Well, I think that somehow we have been experiencing a few decades in which investment in housing was basically lacking in Portugal and in other countries of Europe. Actually, the trend was to reverse, the progress that has been made in terms of public and social housing. And so I think that one key pillar to build a better urban future is to start thinking seriously again about housing policies. And in this respect, I think that there is room for creativity, there is room for experiments and take advantage of what we know now that we didn't know like 40 years ago or 50 years ago, of the technological means that we can use today. But I'm also a bit skeptical about the idea of innovation per se, meaning that anything that is new and is useful, you should use it, okay? But we should not fall into the trap that just through creativity, through innovation, these buzzwords that are very often associated, linked to the idea of an urban future, smart city, etc., etc. I don't think that this is the key, okay? I think that the key factor for a better urban future from the point of view of housing policies is simply to think again and to invest again in housing policies. Because I think that if you do that, there are tons of things that you can, tools that you can use to make it better. I think I'm not a software engineer. I don't have any specific expertise in this respect, but I think that in principle, for example, the platform technology that works today for Google, or talking about housing, if you want to, for Airbnb, I think that this could be, used also by public authorities, by local governments to build a more refined, practical tools to manage housing policy. But sometimes there is and we talked about that at the conference, sometimes there is the idea that, a city just for being smart will be efficient, will be just, will be a wonderful city anyway. And I think this is a sort of a technological dream that it's not going to happen. If, on the other side, we are able to reverse what has been the historical trend in the last decades, that is dismissing, for example, in all European countries, for example, not investing in social housing, dismissing the housing stock that local and national governments had built in the previous years. If we manage to reverse this trend, then we have the chance to build a better future. Okay, and speaking about Portugal, I think it's pretty evident that in many other Southern European countries, the branch of welfare state that was dealing with housing issues is very much underdeveloped. So it's also in many ways a quantitative problem. Because during many decades, the needs of the population for good quality housing were addressed simply on an individual basis and through the market. Okay, so if you had the money, you can get a mortgage and you get a house. Okay. And also governments bought into that. For example, the most of the Portuguese investment in housing policy was actually channeled since the mid-80s through the programs of subsidized mortgages. Okay, so once again, to subsidize in a way what was basically a market mechanism allowing people from middle class to buy their own house. And I think that this creates sort of a lack of balance. Okay, and that's why I think that in many ways it's not of more creativity that it's not more creativity that we need, but sometimes good old-fashioned tools like regulation and simply putting money in social housing, investing in social housing. How you do that? It's another issue. There are many different ways to do that. I don't think that necessarily the ways that were adopted in the past are the right ones, and I think there is of course room for improvement in terms of exactly how you do it, the kind of technological means, technological tools that you use it. I think that in general and as a general rule, and especially in contexts such as Lisbon, regeneration is probably going to be the key. On the one side, because of you know, the idea that it's better not to burn too many resources in terms of land, in terms of concrete, in terms of whatever, and this applies everywhere. But in Lisbon, despite all, you know, the boom in the real estate market in recent years, for example, we still have a city center, urban core, where many houses are empty, for example, and they're empty because, in part because of, you know, of the regulation of it, but in part also because you don't have the condition to live there. So I think that, for example, an effort in regeneration is the way to do it, and especially it is right now in Lisbon. But to come back to what I said, I'm a bit skeptical about the idea that you should, you know, pull out the rabbit out of the hat through some kind of, you know, very good idea, very technologically savvy idea, through creativity, etc., etc. And so you can do that. You can do housing policies, for example, with no money, which is the main question mark, for example, for the so-called Nova Geração de Políticas de Habitação, new generation of housing policy that has been launched by the government, which in many ways seems to bet on the idea that, you know, by somehow implementing a better model of governance on the one side and trying to channel private investments and all the money that is flowing into Lisbon into social housing. Basically, it's more complicated than that, but that's the main idea. That the idea of the new generation is that you can really solve the problem just using these tools. While, for example, it's not clear how far the government is the government, the national government, or for what concerns their own responsibilities, the local government, it's not clear as far as they are willing to go in terms of using regulation, which many would say that the risk is to kill the goose that lay the golden eggs here in Lisbon, that is tourism, that is the real estate market, etc., etc. It's not clear whether or not they're ready to use regulation. It's not clear whether or not they are ready to add substantial sums to the national budget. And I think that today in Lisbon, given the severity of the housing crisis and the fact that it's a crisis that is not limited like it was, for example, 25 to 30 years ago, to marginal sectors of the population, the poor, the immigrants, etc., etc. Now the problem is really about, you know, well, most of people in Lisbon, even people who have a good salary like me. I'm actually despejado myself. I'm going to be evicted from my apartment because, of course, the landlord is greedy, and rightly so, because if you leave it to the market, if you leave it to if you just leave it, okay, of course, every landlord would see the fellow landlord getting more money, and he doesn't want to be a sucker, of course, so he's raising the rent too. But this dynamic is perfectly understandable, okay? But we need to act to balance that, and we need to act on a large scale, which, by the way, is the declared ambition of the government itself. It said that, you know, we're starting from 2% of public housing in many different forms, and we want to get in just few years to 5% public housing in 100% of the housing stock, the national housing stock. And this is an ambitious objective. Sometimes I wonder whether this goal can be reached in just being smart, and I'm skeptical about that.